only wrote half of it.
I only wrote half of it. Go ahead.
Didn't they need 9 out of 13 of
Yeah.
the original states to pass the waiting for it?
Pass the 9 out of 13 states to pass the original Constitution,
Like,
yeah.
that word
And they
is-
set it up as 9 because they knew that they had 9 states that would ratify it. What was 1313?
All states need to approve law of confederation.
That all states needed to approve a law under the Articles of Confederation. It needed to be 13 out of 13. So there's 2/3 twice, there's 3/5 once, there's 3/4 once, there's 9/13, and there's 13/13. Make sure that you're good with those. And I might get tricky and have you do some math on the exam. Go ahead, Candace.
What was the second 2/3?
The proposal of a constitutional amendment and the override of a veto. Override of a veto.
What was the first one was?
Proposal of a constitutional amendment, and the second one was override of a veto. What else have y'all got from chapter 2? Fire away. Go ahead, Salvador. The Virginia plan, the New Jersey plan, and the Connecticut plan or Connecticut Compromise all go together. And if you remember, this is where we talked about whether or not size mattered. What was the deal with the Virginia plan? Go ahead, Toby.
It was for the bigger states, and it was based off of how many inhabitants each state had for voting.
I'm sorry, it was based on how many?
How many people.
How many inhabitants? How many people? Yes. So Virginia, as a big state, they wanted representation based on the number of people, and then they would have more representation because they had more people. New Jersey was a small state. What did they want? They should be equal. New Jersey said if the big states get all of the people that they want, then in fact the small states, and there were 7 or 8 of them, could be outvoted on every single issue because they didn't have enough people. The small states said they wanted all states to be represented equally. That was the New Jersey plan. And how did the Connecticut Compromise deal with this?
The House and the Senate.
Created the House and the Senate, and the House is based on which plan, Samantha?
Virginia.
It's based on the Virginia plan, so population, and the Senate would be based on the
Senate.
New Jersey plan, and it would be based on equality. So that's what that was. The Connecticut Compromise put the two of them together, so the big states had an advantage in their house, the small states had an advantage in their house, but it had to pass both houses to become a law. So they were going to have to overcome the other side. What other questions have you got? Go ahead.
Is criminal searches the same as search and seizure?
Criminal searches is when we were talking about balancing, and I want to be careful with this because I'm not going to test the vast bulk of you on the balancing idea, so I'm not even going to put it on the tape. But the criminal searches were the stories, and there was the vomit case, there was the bullet case, there was the fingernail case. Do y'all remember the 3 cases?
Yeah,
What was the ruling in the vomit case?
they could use it.
Okay,
The
what
pill-
was
it
the
about
what was the
pills?
facts?
The pills, he swallowed the...
The pills, what kind of pills? Morphine. The police had suspicion that there was a guy that was a morphine dealer. This is where we wanted to put Erica's kids in daycare, as I recall. And this guy was selling morphine. In fact, they got a warrant to search his residence. And in fact, when they went to his residence, what happened?
He threw up. He swallowed the pills.
They saw him swallow something, but they weren't sure what it was. Right in front of them is what he did. Okay, they entered, he didn't let them in. They entered, the door was open, they found him in the back bedroom, he swallowed the pills in front of them. And what did the police do?
Got his stomach pumped.
They drug him kicking and screaming to the hospital, and at the hospital made him, they made him vomit, they pumped his stomach. And when they fished through the vomit, Sean, what'd they find? Were they allowed to use the pills?
No. Because it was not with intentions of trying to, I guess, help him and save his life. It was with intentions of trying to get the evidence.
Zoom in on Sean. You got to get that. Sean is actually right. Yeah, sit back a little bit. Yeah, we got to make sure we zoom in on Sean with that answer. Sean just said, in fact, that they took him there to save the evidence, and they did save the evidence, and they found morphine. When it went to the Supreme Court said, no, it's not about saving the evidence, it's about saving his life. Had you said that you went there to save his life, then this would be allowable. But since they went there to save the evidence, they said it was an unreasonable search and seizure, and they could not use this. What about the fingernail? Go ahead.
So she choked out her boyfriend or whatever. And
Yes.
had blood on her fingernail, and the police had just called her down to the
because it's not,
It was external evidence.
Where,
you can,
I remember the
you
case.
can use it because it's like external evidence.
Okay, so somebody choked her boyfriend.
Yeah.
The police invited her down to the station, not because she was a suspect, but just to talk to her to figure out who might have a problem. And when she entered the police station, what did they see?
something red on the finger.
They saw something that appeared to be blood. And when they questioned her on it, what did she do?
Stuck in her pocket. That's why they-
She kind of started, you don't have to film this part, but she kind of started to do this. Okay, so what was she doing?
Hijack.
She was trying to destroy the evidence. The police at that point kind of took her hands behind her back. They extracted a little bit of that from that nail, and what did they match it up with?
Boyfriend's
His
The
DNA
boyfriend's
test.
blood. They charged her with murder. Was that legal?
Yes.
Why?
It's not instant.
She was volunteering it was in plain view as she walked in there. Did they have to read her rights or need a warrant?
No.
Why?
Because it was
She was
voluntary.
already.
She was voluntarily there. They were not detaining her, so they did not have to read her rights. The other thing is that regarding the warrant, she was destroying evidence in front of them. Yeah, that is perfectly legal for them to act to stop the destruction of evidence. They could use it. What about getting shot in the ass when they robbed the liquor store?
Butt bullet, no, they
What?
couldn't use it. Nope,
Why?
it's internal.
I mean, it's his decision. It was like, it wasn't something that was gonna, I guess, kill him. Like if he got hit in the vital organ, I remember trying to make sure.
That's right. If the doctors are there to save your life, then in fact, they will remove the bullet. If it saves your life, of course, even if it doesn't, if the police choose to get access to that bullet and it's out, they can. The police, however, cannot. They cannot order the doctors to do this. Now, if you're knocked out and you go in there and they remove it, then the police can get access to it with a warrant. I mean, it's kind of, it's right there. It's not inside of you. And the difference is, with the nail, it's a non-invasive thing. It's not like they need a medical professional. A police person can get evidence. If you wedge something in places on your body, it's not like they necessarily need the doctor, the medical professional to get that. However, if it's something that's inside of you, just like those pills when we were talking about the morphine, that's invasive, and you cannot get that kind of a warrant to go through somebody's body. If it saves the life, that may be one thing. Now, if you, and we talked about this, volunteer evidence, that can be used. If you're walking and you spit, or if you're at the crime scene for whatever reason, you take a drink and then kill somebody, you've left DNA evidence or fingerprints or things like this around. If you, just vomit, and they didn't make you vomit for evidence, but you're running away and you vomit, and then they find that vomit, they can use that. You have volunteered that evidence. So be careful with these kinds of searches. What other things have you got? You're making a face, Lisa. Stare decisis. I think one class has that so far. I don't know that yours does. Oh, you do? Okay, stare decisis. What does that literally mean? Go ahead.
Let the decision stand.
Let the decision stand. And what were the examples that I gave you of stare decisis?
Roe versus Wade.
And what's the significance of Roe versus Wade? Why is let the decision stand such a big deal?
Because it's been around for so long. Like it's been.
Abortion.
I'm having a hard time concentrating.
It's okay. Listen, you're starting all these things perfect. Understand, with Roe versus Wade, the longer that a case remains valid law, the more difficult it is to overturn it. And it's like planting a tree was the example that I'd given you. If you plant a tree today, you can rip it out of the ground tomorrow, or maybe even in a couple of weeks, or even in a couple of months. If that tree is grown for over 40 years, like Roe versus Wade, it's going to be much, much more difficult to get that out of the ground. What was the example of the case that I gave you, in fact, where stare decisis was overturned? Go ahead.
With the Mormons, wasn't it?
Go ahead.
Was the buffer zone with the?
Wasn't the buffer zone. Go ahead, Ricardo.
They didn't want to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
The guy who didn't want to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. What was the religion?
Jehovah's
The
Witness.
Jehovah's Witnesses. It was the Jehovah's Witnesses. Yes, the Jehovah's Witnesses refused to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance in the West Virginia public schools. What ultimately happened? What did the school say?
They didn't have to stand.
The school wanted them to stand. Why did they want them to stand?
First,
To avoid respect and values.
What's that, Michael?
to avoid rebellion from other religions.
To
Avoid rebellion.
rebel. Okay, rebel. That's fair. Discipline. What'd you say? Respect.
Yeah, Yeah, respect and values.
Respect, values, patriotism. They're saying we want to teach you respect for something sacred like the American government, the American flag, patriotism in the middle of the Cold War. They said this isn't religion at all. This is just about citizenship things. Well, the kids said if you make a stand, because Jehovah's Witnesses do not believe in, or, they do not follow worldly bodies. This is something that they're not going to recognize. Then in fact, you're violating our religious beliefs. And it's not like we just made up this religion. I mean, it's been around for a while. This violates our First Amendment. The first time the case went to the Supreme Court, because it went twice, what happened the first time? Go ahead.
The court actually said, no, you're going to have to do this. But then the kids were castrated, tarred and feathered, and then they went back to the Supreme Court and then said, no, you know what, it's our mistake. Yeah, you can actually not.
The first time it went to court, the Supreme Court said that this is about patriotism and values. It's not about religion. This is healthy for the country. These kids will stand. And then, in fact, what ended up happening, the kids went back and refused to stand. They got castrated. They got tarred and feathered. They got beaten up. The Supreme Court caught 10 kinds of hell. And less than a year later, on Flag Day, the Supreme Court was like, well, you know what? We made a mistake. We are going to respect religious values. That's why people don't have to stand for it today. And they overturned it. And the trick was, it was less than a year later. So the longer that a case remains valid law, the less likely it's ever going to be overturned. Let the decision stand, and the longer it stands, the more it's going to continue to judge future cases. If you get it overturned quick, meaning within a year or two, that's the time to get it, because the longer it stays, the deeper it sinks into the foundation of American life. Go ahead, James.
What was the flag salute?
The flag salute is what we just talked about with the Jehovah's
Here,
Witnesses.
can I put that flag salute, but then you said it was the stair.
They overlap completely together. Yes, they overlap completely together. You might get a question on this where you would be asked to explain stare decisis and give me an example, for example. That might be something that you would see. Or you might just get a question that deals with explain the flag salute case. And the answer is, it overlaps. That's why I have it that way. Go ahead, Jay.
Can we go over full faith and credit clause?
What was the full faith and credit clause? There were 3 parts to it, right? Article 4 of the United States Constitution is the full faith and credit clause. Go ahead, Dustin.
Isn't that where states have to recognize and respect laws and pieces of?
Got the first part, Michael, go.
It's just throwing blanks
It's
down.
when another state is supposed to respect and document another state.
Document.
If you have a valid state document in one state, then in fact other states are going to recognize that. And Michael, do you remember the examples of documents that we talked about? Driver's license would be a good example. You don't have to get a new one every time you go to another state. What was another one?
Marriage.
Marriage license. And believe it or not, gay marriage was typically not respected, but you could make an argument that it should have been. What was the third example of this?
Warrants.
Yeah, extradition. If you've got outstanding warrants, if you're wanted in another state, the idea that the full faith and credit clause would require you to be extradited back to the state where you were wanted. Go ahead.
What was ERA?
Don't worry about ERA. Don't worry about ERA. I'll go ahead and remove that one right now. I'll go ahead and remove that one. Go ahead. What's that?
You remove it already.
Okay, I've removed it already. Okay, go ahead.
Can you explain how the case?
What was the flag burning case? Who was the guy? His first name was Greg.
He
Lee
was
Johnson.
I
Go
remember
ahead.
This day.
He was in Texas. What was going on in Texas?
I can't remember what was happening, but you were burning the flag.
Something very serious was going on, Ian.
Vietnam protests.
The what?
Vietnam protests.
Was not Vietnam protest. It was 1984.
Wasn't it a celebration about Bush getting elected?
Wasn't Bush. Republican National Convention in Dallas, Texas for Ronald Reagan's re-election. Yes. So he stole a flag and he lit it on fire outside of Reunion Arena in Dallas. Red, white, and blue. We spit on you. Reagan, Mondale, who will it be? It doesn't matter. World War III. And he was charged with what? Desecration. He was charged with a flag desecration violation under Texas state law. What was his argument as far as why he should be allowed to burn the flag, or what was Texas's argument? Go ahead, Ricardo.
It was free, he said it was freedom of speech, but Texas said.
Well, hang on. With his freedom of speech, he said that burning the flag was speech. Why would burning something be considered speech? Because speech is like talking. Go ahead, Ian.
Conveys a message.
Burning a flag conveys a message. It's a protest against the country. And number two, it is a message that somebody would likely understand.